and it's preparing. Should take me to. I got about 79, and I got to thank you because you about to send my ratings through the roof.
You got 79 people on already?
Well, 79 people that follow me from all over, wherever on YouTube, all over the world.
Okay.
Okay, here we go.
All right.
Here we go. All right. Welcome to the Prime. I'm your host, God Fibonacci. I am here with a living legend, all-time Cincinnati Bengal great, cornerback Louis Breeden. This man played 11 seasons, correct?
That is right, 11. And I'm alive. You said it was a living legend. I am glad to be alive through COVID.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So I brought him on today because we were going to talk about the state of affairs for the franchise and discuss, this upcoming draft here in about a little less than 24 hours. Will be the draft will be upon us, and so yeah, let's get started. A lot of talk has been made about who should the Bengals take? Should they go weapon or protection for one Joe Burrow? And initially, I was in the camp of, take Penei Sewell, take this what they're calling the generational left tackle that your old colleague Anthony Munoz, has signed off on. And then it wasn't too long after the Super Bowl that I started becoming familiar with Kyle Pitts, the tight end out of Florida.
Mm.
And
yeah, his name comes up quite a bit.
Yeah. And he's also one of those they're calling generational talents. There are actually three, and it's starting to look as if that Cincinnati will have all three, the pick of any of the three. The third would be Jamar Chase. He's being talked about as a once in a generational talent at wide receiver. And with the Bengals having the fifth pick and what's being discussed is possibly for the first time in draft history, quarterbacks are going 1 through 4, then the Bengals may very well have their pick of one of those three prospects. And
I know those are. I mean, I know that you have your favorite guys, and I know you want to go with the offensive weapons, throw the ball all over the field. Kansas City, the Rams, and I love that because Pitts and Chase and those guys, or it was some other guys too, just talented and just weapons. But my philosophy is that you don't build through special skilled players. If your leaf is leaking, if your roof is leaking, if I can get it out, why would you put in new carpeting? You don't need new carpeting. It's leaking. You need to rebuild that first. Why would you put in new furniture, new carpeting, and the roof is leaking? All it's going to do is get all messed up. You're going to have to pull it up and do it all over again. Fix the roof first. That's a part of the foundation of a home. And you can buy all the furniture and the TVs and all the other inside amenities once you get the foundation and once you put the roof on. Without those things, the house crumbles and it falls down. The perfect example is the Kansas City Chiefs. I love Kansas City. Patrick Mahomes, I think, is the best quarterback in the league. I mean, the guy's absolutely fabulous. But what happened to him? Hill, Kelsey, Hartman, Leclerc, and all the other people, when the offensive line broke down, injuries, switching tackle to one tackle, switching a guard to play one tackle, what happened? Collapse. Mahomes he looked like an average quarterback. We couldn't get the ball to you can make an argument that three of the best wide receivers in the National Football League. it doesn't help you, I don't think. If you can't protect the quarterback, if you can't open holes for the running backs, you know, wide receivers become nothing more than wet carpeting. They're not functional until you can fix the roof, which is the backbone of the home with the foundation, and that is the offensive line. And that's where they've been struggling. They drafted Obuehi years ago. I think he was at 21. Fisher in the second round. Billy Price, I think, was 21. Ross, another wide receiver, was I think number 9. And the Bengals' history has been skilled players, wide receivers, tight ends, defensive backs. When the last time they drafted a first-round defensive line, I think it was Justin Smith, maybe Big Daddy Wilkinson before that. They've gone after a couple of tight ends. I just don't think it works. If you look at this division, just go through the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers, go through the Ravens. I think the New England Patriots have drafted 2 wide receivers first round since, I looked it up, I think 1996. Offensive linemen, linebackers, defensive linemen. I think I said offensive linemen, safeties, some DBs. But I tell you what, it's not filled with the kind of things that the Bengals are doing. And I think their success versus those teams' success tell you the whole story. And it has nothing to do with Pitts or Chase or any other wide receiver. I just don't think that's the problem. If I were drafting, I wouldn't have drafted T. Higgins in the second round last year, because how many games did it win? T. Higgins is fantastic. I love him. Now that we have him, I'm glad we have him. But he can only do so much with an offensive line that's been leaking and has a lot of holes in it. And Joe Burrow may be one of those generational quarterbacks, but a generational quarterback is only as good as his offensive line, period. And if you can't protect him, he's just another quarterback in 32 playing around the National Football League.
That's true. Not to cut you off, I wanted to jump in because I thought about what you just said last, and I wanted to apply that to a team, a quarterback and a team who everybody now, I guess, deems the GOAT in Tom Brady. Tom Brady. And I did some research, that I shared where New England, they either had made a trade with a team and brought their first round defense. They drafted, like you mentioned, Pittsburgh. They draft defense in the first round. I believe Richard Seymour was a first round pick. I know Vince Wilfork, Miami, was a first round pick. Maybe Willie McGinnis was a first round pick. And all of these guys are soon to be Hall of Famers. I think Richard Seymour made the Hall of Fame, or he will make the Hall of Fame. But they were a part of a dynasty. But as far as their offensive line went, Tom Brady he landed in a good situation because he had veterans, and those guys were good. But I went back and looked, and I think it was maybe 3 offensive linemen from the time Brady got to New England and Belichick, all the way up until Brady left. They drafted 3 first-round offensive linemen. That's tackle and guard and center combined. And again, different franchises, different way, things are ran. They did build from the inside out in the trenches with that defense, and that's what made them what they were. Tom Brady is great. He is all-time great. And they did build their franchise a lot different. And I give them credit. I just think that, especially in this year's draft, there is so much talent depth-wise in this offensive line class that to pass on a generational talent, offensively, that can help you win games. Because these guys, I understand completely what you're saying. You gotta protect your guy. And I feel like if you can't it was the former GM for the Jets that made a comment about if the Bengals didn't draft Sewell, they should have their license as a franchise revoked in the NFL. I feel like this. I feel like if you have to go that far to that extreme to say that you have to take a tackle at 5 or offensive lineman at 5 as if that's going to cure all ills, and I think you would agree that that's not just going to completely fix the offensive line, then, I mean, yeah, it should be revoked anyway if you feel that way. Like basically the opposite of what he said. If you feel, I feel just as strongly, like if you feel like you have to take, then that means I have no faith in you as a organization, coaching staff, evaluator, all of the above, you know, because we know that one guy is not going, I don't care if it's Sewell, Slater, Darrisaw, none of them, not one of them guys is going to solidify completely that offensive line. And then my thing is this, they have 2 tackles. One is up there in age. He's been there 10 years. He's been in the league 10 years, first round pick. The other guy was a first round pick from 2 years ago, only played 1 season last year and then got hurt again. And yes, they need another tackle, but when Joe Burrow got that knee injury, it was because the guard gave up that sack. And that guard was Michael Jordan out of Ohio State. Who,
Well, the whole line, offensive line was a sieve all season long.
Oh, yeah. I agree. Yeah.
They didn't play well across. I mean, I think the best player on the offensive line was the center. I thought he played consistently. I give Jonah Williams, I mean, he was out the year before with the injury, and he's getting back into to football. But, you know, he was a highly drafted player. So I think the jury is still out on how well he's going to come in and play. But my bottom line is this: wide receiver is not the problem with this football team by any stretch of imagination. It wasn't the problem with the football team with John Ross. So why go after a wide receiver? There are so many other needs. And I'm not a guy who believes in the philosophy of best player available. I've never seen anyone who could pick players, line them up from 1 to 200 and tell me who are the best players in a row. It can't be done. It's impossible. There are too many different positions in football, doing too many different things to make that kind of determination. The best football player, the best available talent. Now, you can do that in golf because they're all doing the same thing. They're playing golf. You can do it closer in basketball because they're shooting, they're dribbling, they're rebounding, they're doing assists. They're doing the same thing. In football, there are too many different positions of players doing too many different things. So it's impossible, I think, to do. What I think you can do, though, you can put players up and you can make evaluations on who's the best guards, who's the tackles, by position and by position only. So therefore, when you are drafting, you're looking at position by position, and you can make a determination as to what player is going to best fit your roster, because you are talking about your roster, the best player who's going to fit your roster, the best player available. Who do you know? I mean, you really don't. And it's been proven with Billy Price, the best player available at, let me see, I wrote it down at, was it 21? Was John Ross the best player at 9? No. So why go through this whole dumb, stupid process? You can't do it. Mel Kiper, McShay, none of them can do it. I've never seen anyone do it. You can't tell me Ken Riley was drafted as far down as he was. The guys, or Lamar Parrish, or me, for example. I mean, I think I was 270. I played 11 years, started for 10. Certain was better than the defensive backs who drafted ahead of me. So evaluate people by position, and then look at your roster and say, hey, look, this guy fits our roster. We need defensive back more than we need wide receiver. We need wide receiver more than we need offensive line. Because if you keep going down the rat hole, best player available, then you keep drafting DBs, you keep drafting wide receivers, you keep drafting tight ends, and you end up what the Bengals are doing as opposed to end up what Pittsburgh does, what New England does, what the Ravens does. Those teams consistently win. Mm-hmm. The Bengals consistently lose. And there's a reason for that. And I think that's the biggest reason, because it's a combination of two things. It's evaluating talent or developing talent. It's a combination. It's both of those, and they haven't done those well. So that's why I don't think, and it's nothing. I want great. I mean, Isaac Curtis is my best friend in the world, man. He was great. But if Isaac Curtis is great as he was, Jerry Rice, I don't care. With my roster, a wide receiver doesn't bring the value that I need to win ball games, because that's not where I'm hurting. I'm hurting on defense, pass rushers, defensive line, offensive line. You draft a wide receiver. As I said, I always go back to Kansas City Chiefs in this playoff game. It is the perfect example, as you see why you can't build with wide receivers. If Kansas City had their offensive line, they would have been a better football team with the second group of wide receivers. You can't do it the opposite way around. You can't play with the second group of defensive line in the first group of wide receivers. That offensive line is they're going to get killed. And there's a value to it. And it allows you to run the football. I mean, the Bengals with Joe Mixon, I mean, he's one of the best backs in the league, but you have to open up holes for him. They couldn't do that last year. You have the block for Joe Burrow. They couldn't do that last year. And I know Riley Reef is an upgrade. I don't know how long he's going to be here. And I'm not sold on Jonah Williams. And I'm not sold on the Bengals drafting process. I don't know what their drafting process is, but for me, looking at the roster, looking at the team, the way I see it every single year, their biggest problem has been offensive line, and on defense, linebackers rushing the passer. And there's always, if you're an evaluator, I don't care what round it is, there's always someone who's in the draft that can help your football team. Now, and that's where the evaluation process comes in. If the people are there who's making those evaluations, if they're not capable of doing it, then maybe you should go somewhere else. Find some people and bring some people who are in, because you have to evaluate talent. You have to know your roster. You have to know what you need to get better. And the Bengals over the last 3 years haven't done that. And, prior to that now, when Marvin was here, I mean, they didn't win playoff games. They made playoffs, but man, they went out and won ball games. For a period, they were dominating the division. They were winning ball games. And I think one of the biggest reasons they didn't win because they didn't have a quarterback who could make plays in big situations. Joe Burrow can do that, but you got to keep him healthy. You got to keep him upright, and you have to allow him time to get the football down the field. Patrick Mahomes, I was listening to someone maybe today or yesterday. I guess he was, people in his face are rushed or whatever 40-something times, and he ran 400 and some yards during the course of the ball game because as soon as he got the snap, someone was in his face. You can't play. You can't. I don't care how good you is. Joe Montana, Brady, Elway, they always fail.
Yeah, I agree. I know you don't really look at the sacks allowed stat. Would you give credit to hurries or pressures as they starting to call that a stat now, whereas they didn't do that like 5-10 years ago. Now because of analytics. Yeah,
I look at it, but like I said before, because we had that conversation. Was it today or yesterday?
Yesterday.
What I'm saying, it could be deceiving because I know someone was talking about some of the players, but playing for Sewell, he didn't give up a sack or this or that. Now, he's a talent. I mean, watch him play. He got his feet. He's strong, and he's big and he's athletic. That's what you want in a left tackle. But he did give up some pressures that caused the sack. He didn't give up the sack because his guy didn't make the sack, but he allowed the quarterback to be in a position where he had to run up in the pocket or run left or run right, that allowed the sack to happen. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was because of his guy that allowed the sack to happen. But I mean, that's not a knock on Sewell. It happens to every offensive lineman in the league because you're just not going to do that. So when someone says that, I'm like, well, that probably didn't happen. That doesn't mean that he's not an awesome player. He's not good. It's just that's just a stat that doesn't mean very much until you look at the real numbers on it, and maybe you can see some things on film. Now, I like Sewell, but as I said before, I like the guy Slater a little bit better because I think if I had to line them up today and put them on the field, Slater would do a better job pass blocking at a left tackle because I saw him do it in college and I saw him do it. What's the kid named Ohio State? Drafted a year ago. What was his name? Dennis, can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of his name. You're not talking about that plays for the Bengals now.
No. He was drafted by Washington. What's his name?
Oh, you're talking about the defensive. That was Chase. I'm sorry.
Chase.
Mm-hmm.
Chase was, dominant player.
Mm-hmm.
Dominant player. Slater had no problem with it. Yeah, you should see his feet, you see his hand play, all the things that he did, and no one was able to do that to the entire season. No one. Now that doesn't mean that Slater is perfect. No one is. But I look at him in terms of it's like any player. They're going to have to improve. They're going to have to be developed because there's flaws in every one game. I mean, there are flaws in all the players who are playing now in the National Football League. They got to work on them. They got to continue to improve and get better. So that's a process of drafting players. And I know they have Pollock back, and hopefully he will be able to develop whoever they bring in because there were a lot of deficiencies on the offensive line, a combination of things, I guess. But who knows? I'm not there. But I know there are a lot of people who are there because you talk about the depth in the offensive line. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But I haven't watched a lot of them. But I know I've watched Darashaw. I watched him as well. Those are three very good players. But Slater was the guy that I thought that really jumped out at me. I mean, in every ball game, the way he handled himself. The way he could move on a reach block, and so can Sewell. I mean, if you see Sewell as big as he is, some of the reach blocks that he makes and the way he gets downfield to the second level, it is absolutely incredible. That shows his athleticism. Slater is the same way. And those two guys really stick out, but I just think Slater sticks out more. He's not as big, but he's 6'4", 305 pounds, and he's going to get bigger and he's going to get stronger. I mean, this is not like when I played, you had tackles playing at 265, 70, 280 pounds. They're beefing up, but I'm not. Some people are concerned about his arm length. Well, Cedric Brady had long arms. They got guys on the team now with long arms, and long arms are only good if you know how to use them. If you have would you rather have a guy who has 34-inch arms, is a hell of a player, or a guy who's 38 and you hoping he can play? Because that's what the metrics say. I want the guy who can keep the guy away from my quarterback. I mean, he can have alligator arms if all I care. If he can block the guy, then so be it.
Right. Correct. And I did a little bit of research on us. I sent you a few of the guys that I looked at as far as like offensive linemen go that I'm pretty sure are going to be there, in the later first round. I actually had thought this was before I started even thinking about anybody outside of Penei Sewell, because I had been thinking about him since last year. And,
his name has been thrown around for a lot, and like I said before, he's a talented player. So you're right about him, and it kind of makes you forget about everybody else. And there are a lot of players who are out there, and just if you go back through history, NFL draft, there are always great offensive linemen out there, and usually it's maybe it won't be the guys who are the 1 and 2 guys. And that's where the talent comes in and evaluating talent. I mean, that much stuff as you look at, and as much as you follow it, it is about looking at talent and not being too absorbed with all the things that are talked about after the football season is over, because I think the video would probably tell you 95% of what you want to know. The combine, the metrics, you want to know how strong the guy is. Yeah, you want to know how fast the guy is, but what is the guy's 40 time means to an offensive lineman? It's not. I mean, maybe from the agility stuff that they do, they want to see he's got good lateral movement and all that stuff. And you have to have that, but Just because a guy can bench press 220, I don't know what they do with it now. Is it 220? 225, 38 times. Well, great. Put him on film. Can he block anyone? No. Well, what good is that strength? Right. If a guy can do it only 26 times and you see him on film, man, he's blocking the guy every time, then yeah, you know, the metrics work to a point. It may be a determination is maybe the guy needs to get stronger. Maybe a guy has shorter arms and he can do, you know, 30 versus a guy with long arms. You're just not going to be able to do as many. You know, he's got to lift it up to a lot further. A lot goes into that too, but you turn on the film, the video, and it would usually take you to where you need to go. I mean, I'm not saying that that's not all of it, obviously, but when you're doing all of your evaluating, you've gone through the combines, I would say go back to the video, and the video would take you, you know, it's like breadcrumbs, man. If you can't find your way home, follow the breadcrumbs. And I think the video would tell you that when you're looking for players. What they do on the field is more important than anything else you could possibly do during the offseason.
I mentioned about, you know, the hurry stat or the pressure that would be also pressure allowed to other people. They talk about hits. That might as well be a sack in my book. You know, they have 3 different PFF. I'm speaking of Pro Football Focus. They have sacks allowed, hits, and hurries. And I think the most important would be hurries. Now, not just looking at that number, but to compare each player at their respective position, I would be looking at, because we're talking about pass protection, right? So I would be looking at, if I'm grading who would be the best player or ranking, you know, who would be among the best, I'm going to be looking at a guy that blocked, you know, 500 times or more in a season, pass blocking, versus a guy that only blocked 250 times in a season, you know, rather than just looking at the number. Like, for instance, looking at Rashawn Slater. Rashawn Slater in 2018 gave up 15 hurries, allowed 2 sacks, and 1 quarterback hit. But he pass blocked 594 snaps. So I would say that's pretty damn good.
Is that pretty high compared to the rest? Because I haven't seen it. Is that pretty good with the rest of the tackle? That's a high number.
Yeah, that's higher than Penei Sewell in 2019. Penei Sewell only blocked 500, about 100 less. Let's see, 594. Yep. Penei Sewell blocked 491 on pass blocks.
Yeah, and a lot of, you know, too, because just like you said, you look at the numbers, but because we always say that looking at the numbers don't tell the whole story, because some teams will run a lot more, some teams will pass a lot more. Some teams, I mean, the competition is different.
Correct.
Against different teams. Sometimes you're playing against a team that are linebackers who are maybe a little bit more elusive, and some teams will blitz you more sometimes, some games. So the competition and schemes and everything has to be taken into effect. So those raw numbers would tell you something, but I don't think it tells you the real things you need to know, because a guy can have, playing against good competition, he could have, I don't know, 200 pass protections less and be the guy who really stands out on those times he's, you know, set up to pass block, just because he's very good at it versus someone who's had more. So I think you have to take all that in consideration, but don't be stuck on one number. You know, I'm not stuck on a number saying, when I see that saying the guy who never gave up, you know, a sack, only gave up 2, or how many times did he have, who was he playing against, and who was the competition, and a lot of other things goes into it. I want to see what happened on the video and see how he drop steps, and see how he sets, and see if guys are getting inside, and see his hand placement, and just see a lot of things to make an evaluation. And there's sometimes you can tell a guy, like, you know, position that I played, sometimes you can tell a guy can run Guy has good hip turn movement, but you can tell that he hasn't been taught some of the basic fundamentals that would help him cover. Not all coaches are created equal. They may not ever play to position, and some things that they may be teaching may be, just maybe a little bit flawed. So that evaluation has to take into consideration as to whether I can develop a guy or not. The guy can really run, man. You see nobody runs by him. And you have some guys who really don't look at the ball, and they cover well, they turn their hips well, but when they get in position, they've been taught to do certain things where not looking back for the football allows the wide receiver to catch the ball. You get interference calls and a lot of other things. Changing those techniques can make a ball player better. So interceptions by our defensive back sometimes can be deceiving. He may have been beat 5 of those times. The ball could have been underthrown. Now, I'm only saying that about these things because statistics, as I said, can be very deceiving. Video don't lie. Mm-hmm. I mean, you think that? If I'm watching a boxing match and someone told me that, well, the fight wasn't that bad, and I look at the same fight and the guy got his ass kicked pretty bad, well, it was bad. Right. Because I saw it on video. So you have to get into the process of knowing what you're looking for and finding it and then evaluating from that standpoint, because otherwise those statistics can get you, they can get you in all kinds of trouble. The kind of trouble the Bengals got in combines with John Ross. John Ross ran the smoothest, 4.2 something?
Yep, fastest time in recorded combine history. Fastest than he got.
Did you see it?
I did. Yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
That was the smoothest, the most fluent, the easiest, quickest 4.2 I've ever seen from start to finish I've ever seen in my life. It just looked like he went from 0 to whatever in first down, and it was smooth. Mm-hmm. I mean, it wasn't it wasn't a struggle. It was as decisive, straight line running as I've ever seen in my life. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, like, Jesus Christ, this guy can run. They fell in love with it. Yeah. Go to video. What is he doing with that 4.2 speed? Right. If the speed doesn't match up to what he's doing on the field, then, well, maybe he's not a first round pick. Maybe he's more of a third round pick, and maybe he's a second. I don't know. But at number 9, and you can't get him on the field, Houston, we got a problem. There's something wrong with your evaluation process.
Yeah, that's true. And on touching on that, furthermore about the evaluation, of course, we can't look at all the film. That's why they have, organizations have teams of people, on their staff, looking at position groups. Yeah. And somebody in my position, in my seat, of course, I can't look at all the film of everybody, but what I would rely on, and I think that they probably did, I'm sure the organization did back in the day, they would just rely on accolades. Well, what award did he win? Was he that indicated that he might have been the best at the position? And that may have gotten him in trouble. It may have worked at times. And I bring that up because within this particular draft, there are, let me pull it up. There are exactly 1, 2, 3, 4 unanimous All-Americans, not consensus, but unanimous, meaning everybody that votes on these All-American awards unanimously voted for a particular player to be the best at his position. There are 4 unanimous offensive linemen in this one draft, and it's only because Penei Sewell opted out because he would have been drafted, last year had he came out. But he's on last year's 2019's unanimous All-American list. And then this year you have Landon Dickerson from Alabama. He was the center that got hurt in the game before the national championship, but he was considered to be all world. Wyatt Davis, who I didn't get to see much of, but he's on this list. He's a guard for Ohio State. And then Alex Leatherwood was the tackle for Alabama. Yeah. and road grader, better run blocker than pass protector. But I think he would play, guard in the league.
Okay.
But you have these 4 guys. Now we know Sewell is going to go top 10. We know that.
Yeah.
But Dickerson towards ACL. They're going to want to see where he's at. So he's probably going to drop at the earliest. He'll go round 2. I'm just giving him round 2 because, he's one of the best. But he may drop. Wyatt Davis. I'm sure he's probably going to go late round 1, if not, definitely he'd be somewhere in the 2nd round because teams need offensive linemen. Leatherwood, he might go late 1, but definitely 2nd round. But this is, I could scroll back in history and I'm pretty sure that I couldn't find like 4 offensive, because the list changes. It's not always like, multiple guys at that position that's consensus All-Americans. It could be more. It could be like 3 or 4 wide receivers in one, consensus All-American. But like I said, I say that to say there are 4 of what they deem these writers and these people that watch these guys game in, game out from different publications and organizations. They get together and vote for 4 guys to be in this class. I think that's saying something. And then there are guys that are just consensus, not unanimous. That list is separate from this list. And you have guys that, they couldn't make it probably because they didn't play at the University of Alabama. 2 of those guys played at Alabama, and they won a national championship. But one of the guys that I'm thinking of that is a consensus All-American is the guy that blocked for, who people are saying is going to go number 2, Zach Wilson to New York. Brady Christensen, 6'7", 300+ pound guy. He probably didn't get as much, exposure, of course, as he plays in BYU. But he's a consensus All-American. He's talked about as going in the 2nd round or later. Nobody's talking about him going 1st round. Samuel Cosme, he's a product of University of Texas. He was born and raised right down here in Houston. He's an All-American, blocked for Sam Eschlinger, whatever his name is, for 4 years or whatever. Senior veteran. He would remind you of, and I'm sure Brady Christensen the same way, the same measurables of Andrew Whitworth, more so Cosme. But these guys are All-Americans that nobody's talking about to go in the 1st round. Definitely not the top 10, but there are other guys that are not on that consensus All-American list that are going in the top 15 picks or so, like a Darisaw, like a Slater. Of course, Sewell, he's on the list. But but Slater and Darisaw, I don't think they're on that list. Elijah Vera Tucker was another guy, went to USC. He may be an All-American. I need to pull that up. But there are a lot of guys, and then there are guys that, because there are only so many that you can put on the list.
Yeah.
There are guys that are, hidden gems at premier schools. They're just not getting the notoriety because of all these other, big names ahead of them. And it's the same thing with other positions too. It's the same thing with wide receivers. It's the same thing with defensive backs and running backs. It's the same thing with, at every position. It's guys that's not getting attention.
Well, usually there's some pretty good depth in spite of what some of the experts say. In every draft, they say, well, there's no good DBs in this draft, no linebacker. Well, they're just full of crap. I mean, you can go back and look at it and you can document and say, hey, these guys turn out to be all pros and very good football players. And then you can see where they've made determinations that this is the best draft. And then you go back and look at it. Well, turns out this draft wasn't so good. You never know what you're going to get. I mean, sometimes you never really do. And I know that you because you follow this, you talk about the depth in the offensive line, and that could be very much the case. But and if that is the case, then that would be the only reason that I would take a Jamar Chase, because I knew I can get a guy who was going to be a dominant guy, who I knew who was going to be able to come in and start later on. But that wouldn't be my priority wide receiver. As I said before, I love the New England Patriots, the Ravens and Steelers philosophy in building a franchise than what I do with the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals have gone heavily skill positions, and those three franchises have heavily gone, the front seven, and it makes a difference. I mean, it's not about just drafting those players; it's drafting the players that fit, that they can come in and help you. They're just better than the Bengals at that part of it anyway. But I wish the Bengals would get in the habit of, there are some defensive linemen and defensive ends who can put pressure on the quarterback. I mean, defensively, they just weren't very good. And I forget, I knew at one time, how many defensive back, maybe about 5 in the last first round picks in so many years, but they're only as good as the defensive line. You can waste the talent of a DB by not being able to rush the passer. Yeah. Or sometimes it's just playing the scheme that doesn't really fit what he does well. But if you got a guy that can cover, you can't rush the passer. What good is he? You can't cover anybody for 5 or 6 seconds. It's just impossible to do. Eventually, the guy's going to get open and he's going to kill you. So I just value especially as a former DB, I value the front seven. I mean, gosh, the front seven is a DB's best friend. The offensive line is a quarterback and a wide receiver's best friend. If I'm going to play a ball game and you tell me this is the option you have for this ball game, I'm going to take your offensive line away or your wide receivers away for one ball game. Which one do you want as a quarterback? Which one? Your wide receivers or your offensive line?
Offensive line.
Huh?
I want my offensive line.
Oh, hell yeah, you want your offensive line. Yeah. So that's my position. It's not about now, you want the best wide receivers, but the building block, the base, is the offensive line. And like I said, sometimes it doesn't matter how good your wide receivers are, because you've seen wide receivers, man, that have been just doggone great. They're the best in the league, but man, you can't win ball games if you can't play defense and you can't run the football and you can't protect the quarterback. It becomes where it's never a waste, but you're not getting out of him what you could get if you can protect the quarterback. Yeah, and I mean, and sometimes you can have a great wide receiver, and I mean, the offensive line may be there, but sometimes just a quarterback. You have that angle at it sometimes too.
And that's what they endured the last, what was that, from 20, almost 10 years he was here?
Who's that?
I'm talking about Andy. He's from Houston, Katy, Texas, which is right down the road.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was the problem. It was him.
And that's the problem. Look, I think you can win with T. Higgins and Boyd and everyone else. I mean, Boyd is one of the best slot receivers. The guy's just tough.
Yeah.
I may have saw him drop a couple of balls last year. He catches everything.
He can catch everything.
Yeah. Higgins is a rookie. I mean, he's just going to be good.
Yeah.
I mean, there are teams who don't have two people who are like that.
Correct.
And as I said before, it's not about not wanting the best 3 or 4 wide receivers in the league, but watch that Super Bowl, man. Watch that game. Watch the best quarterback in the league on his back running around. What good is it if you can't protect him? Watch those wide receivers. They may be open. What good is it? Are they being open if the quarterback can't find time to get the ball to him? It's that delicate balance. Which one is more important? Both are important. But given the option one versus the other, which one do you give more weight to? Which one do you want to play a ball game with? Losing your offensive line or losing every wide receiver on that team? You got your offensive line, you can still run it. The guys can come in and play them. I mean, they're still professional ball players. They can, if you can protect the quarterback, Joe Burrow can find people open. But if you can't block, you can bring in any running back, all the wide receivers. Well, Barry Sanders, I'll take him out of the Barry Sanders can run through anything, you know. He could find a hole where there's no, you can just put, you may not even need an offensive line in front of him. Just hand him the football, he'll find something to do. I mean, that guy was incredible, but I'm being facetious now, but he was that good. Yeah. If I had my choice, it's going to be the front seven, that quarterback, and it becomes it's never going to be easy, but it becomes easier to win ball games filling those wide receivers in, because those guys are professionals, and I just don't think it's that hard to do if you can evaluate talent. I really don't.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to mention something. I keep getting notifications about the call that we're already on. I set a reminder and it just kept going off. I found the list of all Americans. So the ones that aren't unanimous, again, it was Brady Christensen from BYU that blocked for Zach Wilson. So he must be pretty good, you know, if Zach Wilson is being talked about as being the second overall pick. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, though, as I say that, I'm thinking about the number 1 pick in Trevor Lawrence, but nobody's talking about Jackson Carman, you know, going in the first round. And I'm trying to figure out why that is, you know.
Okay. Yeah. I'm not, you know what, the SEC has a lot of talent. And I think most people would say they overall football talent in totality probably had the best talent in Division I. But it's like I compare it to playing a football game, high school football game, and you play a team that's probably the best team in the state because they've got talent in every position. And they're playing a team that's not that talented, but they may have 4 players that are more talented than anyone on the opposition. They're probably better, but you can't win with 4 players. I only say that to say that I don't look at, I think Alabama and Ohio State and some of the people who are scouting suffer from assuming that those talents are naturally better. And sometimes they lose focus on a guy at, I don't know, at Miami of Ohio or this team or that squad. And they lose out on some talent because overall, you know, Alabama's just good. You know, if you have 22 and they're great players versus a team that has only 3 or 4, then, you know, you're going to overwhelm them.
Right. But
those 3 or 4 on that opposing team may turn out to be the best pros because they're just more talented than any of those players individually. Mm-hmm. So that's where the trick comes in. You just got to find the best talent. Don't get stuck on Ohio State. And I think that's where people got stuck on people like Billy Price, Andre Smith from Ohio State, who was a good player, but you know, he was never the best.
Andre, from Alabama years ago.
Yeah, he was never the best. And I think it just gives you you're graded on another level just because you went to school there. Not saying that it's bad because Andre Smith was a very good player.
Right.
But you better check out the talent on some of these other squads and look at those guys individually and don't get so stuck and honed in on someone because they went to Alabama, they went to Georgia, they went to USC, they went to Clemson, and they went to some of these other schools. And I think the Bengals may be suffering a little bit from that because some of the picks they made, I mean, I saw Billy Price play. I remember the draft, and I told one of my teammates, because I was down there at the stadium when they drafted him, and he looked at me, what do you think? I said, I looked at videos, man. I don't see what they are seeing in Billy Price. Not that he's not a good player, because he is, but he was, I think he was an Outland Trophy winner. But I didn't see him as the best, as the 19th player in the draft. It just,
no.
And he was not. So, and you're not always going to be right. It's impossible to always be right because there are a lot of players out there. But you shouldn't miss that many times in the draft over the last few years, because all it does, is that it sets your squad back. All these guys that you're expecting to play, come in and start at some point, maybe not even as a rookie, but you want them to contribute in some kind of way. And if they don't contribute at all, that says a lot about what you are doing. And if you don't fix it, it's going to be a revolving thing over and over again. You're always going to be searching for a wide receiver. You're always going to be searching for that guard. You're always going to be searching for someone to rush the passer. If you just don't know what you're doing, you honestly don't know what you're doing. But if you're constantly picking the wrong players in, you're always at the bottom of the. You're always behind Pittsburgh. You're always behind. You're going to be behind Cleveland, because Cleveland has done some things well over the last few years, last couple of years anyway. And you're always going to be behind the Ravens. And the Ravens and Steelers have been, as over the last few years, has been as consistent as anyone in terms of the way they draft and developing players. So I don't think there's a secret recipe, but you got to get the recipe right.
You got to get it right. You said you got to get it right. And I was going to say something about Cleveland. You brought them up. They're getting all this attention because it came out that when they signed Jadeveon Clowney, I think they said something like now they have like 11 starters or more than 11 starters that were all first-round picks or something like that, or all the defense, something. It was some ridiculous number that they had like first-round picks. Well, they got 2 number 1 or 3 number 1 overall picks, because Clowney was number 1 overall, Myles Garrett was number 1 overall, and then Baker Mayfield was number 1 overall.
Yeah, Myles Garrett is a player. I think with Clowney, what was that? Was that Seattle?
Yeah, he was with Seattle, where they got the best out of him there. But he's he was never.
Yeah, and I think some teams they had him standing up. I mean, he wasn't a stand-up guy, 4-3. I mean, I think you were just wasting his talent. He needs to have his hand on the ground. I mean, it doesn't. I don't know what they expected from him. It was like when the Bengals brought James Harrison. James Harrison Pittsburgh was tough, man. Mm-hmm. But he played in a 3-4. The Bengals brought him here to play a 4-3. It just wasn't.
Didn't work. Yeah.
Didn't work. And I don't know why you didn't. I don't know why you would even think that it would. It has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with the scheme, because he's a great player. Yeah. And that's where you have to put the players match his skill sets with what you want to do. Otherwise, you're hurting your team and you're hurting your player. And you have to know that going in. And mysteriously, they thought the guy who's been all those years, that's all he's ever done. Even with Clowney, you bring him in, hands down, now he's standing up. You're wasting this guy's talent as a pass rusher, man. And I think that's what they did with him, with Clowney.
Yeah. They I mean, because it was, forget the analyst, I want to say it was Stephen A. It was a group of them where they were all talking. And they talked about the difference between Myles Garrett and Jadeveon Clowney. It was, or not him. Maybe they was comparing him to J.J. Watt because he played with J.J. and they brought him in. They thought that they would be like this all-world, all-time great defense. Mm-hmm. But it was like he never lived up to what he did in college.
Yeah.
He never lived up to the number 1 overall.
Yeah, he was awesome in college, wasn't
he? Yeah.
He he blew. He was the guy they were talking about. And that thing comes up again, always generational player. It's not something that I use, but they've made that with a lot of players, and it turns out the generational player comes from somewhere else. You just never know what you're going to get. But if you are one of the top 20 picks, you should get a good player. He may not ever make All-Pro. You don't have to be perennial All-Pro to be one of the best players in the league. But you have to be on the field. I mean, but it doesn't do any good to draft someone who can't get on the field. That means you have failed. If you don't produce, if the guy doesn't make an All-Pro, I mean, I play with guys never made All-Pro, never made Pro Bowls. But I tell you what, they were good players, great players. The Bengals at one time were drafting the guys like Max Montoya. I think he was 7th round. Dave Lapham was a lower round pick. Joe Walter, Steve Kozerski, all these guys were developed in lower rounds. They were able to find guys because they had a Jim McNally, offensive line coach, who they really relied on to find guys in lower rounds. They had the luxury of not having to draft high round draft picks because there's so much talent out there at the tackle position. Just like you said, there's a lot of talent in the draft. There's a lot of talent always out there. Mm-hmm. If you can spot it and bring them in, this guy's probably better than the first, second, or third tackle that was in the draft. And it turns out that to be that way a lot because there's just so much talent that is out there. And a lot of times, it's not that much difference between the players. Maybe one guy has more prestige. He's playing somewhere else. Maybe some guy comes in and he's just developed. There were certain things that he wasn't doing well or doing correctly that would make him be a better player. And all of a sudden he gets with the coach, he gets with the team, and he's coached up. And all of a sudden, he's better than the guys who were drafted ahead of him. And it happens all the time. Mm-hmm. Every draft, every single season. But they don't have Jim McNally anymore. And they don't have that guy I think that can rely on to say, hey, look, we don't need to draft a guy in the first round. This is a guy in the fourth round. This is a guy we can get in the fourth round. And I guarantee you, he's better than those guys. Jim McNally could do that. I mean, he just could. I mean, he understood the position and he understood the talent. He knew how to develop. I mean, he worked with Anthony Munoz. He didn't make Anthony Munoz just special.
Right.
He was strong, athletic. Now, McNally helped him to become a better player, but I think Anthony, regardless of where he went, I think he was going to be an all-pro. I think Jim Anderson made him to be a better player, probably made him make more, but he was going to be a Hall of Famer because he was that good. Mm-hmm. But you get the right coach with the right player, that player can be a good player. He can become great. And any player can be developed, needs to be developed because they don't come in with all the skills they need. No one ever does. And I think, like I said before, there's a combination of, there are two things. The talent and making that talent better and where they can fit into your system and help the ball club. And that's been missing the last few years since Marvin has been gone. Probably the last couple of years that Marvin was here, something has been amiss. It's just not the same. I don't know what it is, but it's why they're in trouble. I mean, if you're drafted at the bottom of the draft year after year, and you may have some law of averages says you're going to have a good season. Mm-hmm. But if it's sporadic, there's something wrong and you need to change it. And the Bengals haven't really ever just went in and blew everything up like some of the franchises do. And maybe that's what they need to do. Just blow it up and start all over.
And I think they have started that with when they let Marvin go. I want to kind of say something about him, and as fans were clamoring that he stayed on and was like in the role I guess Duke Tobin is in as the
scouting,
scouting and evaluator, because I gave him credit. He did find people, but it goes back to like the coaching, quote unquote, and development of the player. Yeah. And that's when I think that they failed. But when, draft after draft, it's like, oh, give them an A, give them a B plus, give them a, but they couldn't turn those guys into the great players. Sure, they made the playoffs, but it's like you said, something was wrong with the recipe. Something did not mix well if they're always right there in the 20s and then they fall back into the teens and then they go back to there's something missing. They couldn't get that together. But moving forward, I think that when they let him go and they let majority of the staff go, they kept some people on board. But they brought in Zach Taylor, somebody fresh. I'm gonna be honest, I thought he was just another puppet. I thought he was just like, they just wanted to go with the trend of finding a new hot coordinator, young guy, Sean McVay and all of that.
Well, he was never even a coordinator.
Right, never even a coordinator. But at the same time, Ravens coach, what's his name? He was the same way. He was never offensive or defensive coordinator.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not saying you have to be. I mean,
right. I get what you're saying, but yes,
I'm totally for that. Going away from the trend, the hot offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator. I'm just like, wait a minute, coaching is about, man, getting guys to play. The head guy, anyway, he doesn't have, because the first thing of offensive coordinator, the first thing of coaching, what is he going to do? He's going to hire an offensive coordinator. He's going to hire a defensive coordinator. I mean, you have to run. It's like the CEO, man. You have to run the organization. It is you, man. You're accountable. You have a fiduciary responsibility to bring some wins to the shareholders, which are the fans, man. And you have to bring in people who can accomplish those goals. I mean, Forrest Gregg wasn't a coordinator, but Forrest Gregg was the guy who was a
player, wasn't he?
Hall of Fame player, but he was the guy who was in charge. There are a lot of players, a lot of coaches who have been that way. I mean, nothing against coordinators, because if you're a coordinator, you can command the respect and you can get the most out of the players. That's what you want, defensive or offensive. But if you're just a guy who's a coordinator and that you don't have all the other skills and the skill sets that the head guy is going to be the CEO, then you're probably going to fail, because it's more than that's when it becomes more than X's and O's. And that's why some X's and O's guys never become good head coaches, because that's what they are. They're great at what they do. But when it becomes the head guy and that getting guys motivated, getting guys to believe in what you're doing, taking charge, and the team feels that you are the guy who's captain of the ship, and you're going to lead them in a storm, and you'll follow him anywhere. You have to be that guy. And I've seen some coordinators. I mean, they were great X's and O's, but I tell you what, they couldn't be a head coach. So you have to make those choices by looking at the guy, and you better be looking beyond how many wins he won when he was a coordinator at New England. And you see the coordinators there, not most of them haven't done well.
Right. Flop.
And they're good, and they're great coaches.
Right.
But it doesn't translate to being a good head coach. There are so many guys who especially black coaches, they just overlooked. They never get to be a coordinator. But as you said, Taylor not being a coordinator is no big deal to me. I mean, I just want a guy to be a good head coach, and you can find good head coaches at any position. I think Bill Cowher was he a special team coach at once, and then he moved up, and But Pittsburgh is a different animal, though.
And then he came up under a Hall of Fame coach. He came up under Marty.
Yeah. Pittsburgh has had 4 coaches in 4,000 years. I mean, they're just a model. And I just don't know why people don't follow and just look and see what Pittsburgh is doing, what New England is doing, what the Ravens are doing, and say maybe we should try a little bit of that mold. You don't have to do everything, but some of that direction in terms of building and sustaining things. The Bengals are on the complete opposite. And I just don't think it's an accident as to why they consistently win, and the Bengals can win here and there, and they go into, they go into the dark ages where they can't get out of the way of themselves. Yeah, that's the difference between the two franchises.
Yeah, I really think that now more so, they have the right coach, if you will, or motivator, leader, however you want to label him, because of this guy. And I mean it when I say it. I think Joe Burrow is transcendent. I think he is going to be one of the all-time greats, and that makes your job easier as a head coach. That boosts you. It's like if Jimmy Johnson and Barry Switzer didn't have Troy Aikman, I highly doubt that dude would be going to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. Well, I think that you're right on Joe Burrow. I saw him play in college, and I was always impressed every time I saw him play. I mean, really, every time I saw him play, he was, he played well. But being a generational talent, in order to do that, he needs a lot of help. I mean, football is not an individual sport. I mean, thank God Tiger Woods didn't have to depend on 10 other people. You know, otherwise he would have, you know, he may have failed. But it's an individual sport.
Yeah,
you do it on your own. The quarterback needs a lot of help. I would feel more confident in the generational talent analogy if he was at Pittsburgh or if he was at, you know, New England.
Yeah.
Because they have a track record of success. The Bengals do not. And I don't think it's not an accident. I don't think you can say this thing is happening, this stuff is happening accidentally. No more than Michael Jordan wasn't great accidentally. Jabbar wasn't great accidentally. You could just see, you can see the talent. And sometimes, you know, players sometimes fail, especially in football. It's not because they failed. They were great players, but they never win championships because football just takes a lot of people, man, to put a team together and win. And there are a lot of guys who are not in the Hall of Fame right now who are better than players in the Hall of Fame because they just didn't win. They didn't win. Ken Anderson, in my opinion, was a superior quarterback, was a better quarterback than Terry Bradshaw. I think Terry Bradshaw had one more touchdown than interceptions, but they won, I think, 4 Super Bowls. That matters. That counts in football. If I had to choose between Lynn Swann, Stallworth, and Isaac Curtis, I'm going to take Isaac Curtis because I covered all 3. They couldn't do what Isaac Curtis did, but those guys won 4 Super Bowls, and they were great players. I'm not saying that they weren't, because they were. You look at some of the things that they did on film, their Hall of Fame, their bus is deserving. But there are a lot of guys who are not there because, you know, they just didn't win. Kenny Riley, 65 interceptions, never made a Pro Bowl, not one time, ever. If he'd have been at Pittsburgh, he would have probably made 8 or 9. At Dallas, same thing. Cincinnati, because we didn't win, didn't go.
Yeah. And
it's not fair, but that's just the way the thing is. Football is it's a different animal, man. And trying to put a roster together with, what is it, 55 whatever players it is, it's not easy, man. It's just not, because that is a lot of talent to evaluate. And I mean, it makes it easier with free agency because you see the players play at this level. I mean, you know who can play, you know who's pretty good. And you can bring those in. I mean, New England does it all the time. They, you know, guys come in, guys come out, and they maintain it. But New England is probably and I know I've used it a lot, it's probably the worst example because they don't do that without Tom Brady. No. And you talked about how good he was. You just don't do it without Tom Brady. It was just good. And at least not all of those, because some of those games they won, it was the defense that won those ball games, especially early on. I mean, it was, you know, they kept people out of the end zone when Brady didn't put up big numbers. But that's football. You know, you have that. You just, I mean, you need both, especially if one is off that day. The offensive off, you can depend on your defense. The defensive off, and maybe you can go out and score 36 points and win a ball game. That's where you need that balance, and you need both sides. And the Bengals, they don't have both sides of the ball. They were bad defensively. They were bad offensively. Generational quarterback. This guy's good, man. I don't want to see him get hurt. And I want them to build the best foundation possible to protect this guy. And the offensive line is just not for the quarterback, it's for the running game as well. I mean, Joe Mixon is a beast, man. Feed him, and you can open a hole for him, you know. But I'm, you know, I mean, if they draft Jamar Chase, they draft Jamar Chase. Not what I would do, but you're still going to, you still need to rush the passer, and they don't have that right now. I know they brought a guy in from, I think it was from Minnesota?
New Orleans.
New Orleans, yeah. inside. I mean, I know Reader is coming back. They need to find. He's a run stuffer, not a pass rusher. They're going to have to find a way to rush the passer. To me, that's more of a priority than wide receiver. To me, wide receiver is just way down the road for me. With this ball club, is way down the road. I don't think.
And I looked at it. Again, this is before I was on, Team Pitts, Team Chase, and all of that. When I was looking at Sewell, and then you told me to look at the film on Slater. I actually looked at it like, okay, let's do a mock draft where we go offensive line first, and they take one of those two guys, Slater or Sewell. And then I mentioned to you about these receivers. Before that, I told you, I know you follow those guys. Yeah. And it's like nobody's talking. They're starting to. Of course, it's going to start coming out the closer and closer we get. And then, especially after the first round is over with, everybody that I talked about a while ago, they're going to act as if they've been talking about these people. And it's like, no, these are hidden gems. And it's the same thing, not the offensive line. We talked about that. But defensive line, and I agree with you 100%. And that's how New England and Pittsburgh and Baltimore, they all built their respective dynasties by drafting those guys in the first round. And there is a formula, there's a recipe. We could go back and for every Super Bowl champion, I'll be willing to bet you money. You're not going to find a Super Bowl champion without a first round defensive lineman, linebacker, or safety. You got to have like 2 out of the 3. Out of all 55 champions, you got to have.
The Bengals are in trouble then.
Yeah, they are. And that's why I said it's gonna have to be like some trades or something or other, or some more acquisitions to come. Training camp. But yeah, I mean, it's only like maybe 1 or 2 exceptions to that rule. And I want to say one of them was the 99 Rams, the greatest show on turf. But they were loaded on offense. So
they were.
Your defense, a lot of rest, a lot of ease. But I wanted to talk about defensive line, and I wanted to point to another franchise, the Indianapolis Colts. They only had one guy, and he's in the Hall of Fame, Dwight Freeney, that was drafted in the first round. The other guy, who I actually went to school with at Alabama A&M, he's going to the Hall of Fame.
Who's that, Mathis? Who?
Robert Mathis, Big Bob Mathis.
That's why I said Mathis. Mathis was and these were 2 small guys. Yeah. And that's all they really had, because they had that formula. Tony Dungy had that formula. It was like, we just gonna do the NASCAR package. We gonna rush for and drop whatever. We gonna take our chances. But they 9 times out of 10, they get into your quarterback. They either sack or they pressure and rushing him. Freeney was so good. Did he come from Syracuse?
He did. Yep.
Freeney was so good. He had, I guess the guy was probably only about 6 feet, 6'1", and
same with Mathis. Yeah.
He had the best spin move. Man, he just spin. He was quick. He used his hand well.
Yeah.
He and Mathis coming off those edges, man, were tough. It's like I said, it's all about evaluating talent. I mean, you don't have to always have a first round new, but there's always guys second, third round. They come out and, golly, these guys are good. How did you miss on this guy?
Right.
But we don't. I don't know if we have an Ozzie Newsome here in Cincinnati or some of the other guys. Ozzie did a great job with the Ravens. He just seemed to find people. And drafting is an art, man. It's some guys are Picasso and some guys draw stick people like you. So I don't. Not to you could be an artist. I don't know, but everybody is not the same. Just because a guy wears the has a card that says draft expert or GM or whatever, it doesn't mean he's really that good at it. And only time will tell. And I want to go back to something you said. I don't think the Bengals have ever blew anything up in the sense of really blowing everything up. They got rid of Marvin, and they brought in someone else. But I'm talking about in the sense where general manager, what they don't have scouting to do, but the guys who's basically the GM is still here. So They haven't really done. The Bengals play it pretty safe.
Mm-hmm.
They're a pretty safe organization. You can almost bet that if people think this is where they're going, pretty much that's where they go in the first round. They don't move up that much. They don't move back. And I think if I'm a GM, if there's a player that I really want,
you're going to move and get it.
Yeah, I'm going to go get it. I'm not going to give away everything, but I'm going to go get it.
Right.
It just may take that. And some teams are willing to take that chance. That's not the Bengals' MO. They play it pretty safe, and it's pretty much to the script. You can pretty much say this is, well, everyone said they were going to take this guy, and this is who they take. Maybe they feel that this is the obligatory thing to do, man. This is what they're supposed to do. I like the teams who do their homework, and all of a sudden you see a draft pick that, everyone says, well, this guy was projected as a second round pick. Well, heck, if you think that guy is that guy, you did your homework, go get it. Don't be listening to everybody else.
Correct.
You can miss on any round, but if you think that's your guy, get it. And the teams who are good, the scouting people who are good general managers, they can make that evaluation and make that determination, and that's why they win. And as I said before, it ain't no secret that Pittsburgh, New England, and I keep going back to those teams, the Ravens, and now Kansas City. There's a reason they do it. But it does help, though. It makes it a lot easier when you have a quarterback in place, because he can cover a lot of the ills on defense, on offense, and he can make up for a lot of the flaws on defense just by outscoring everybody. I mean, that's what Kansas City did. I mean, Kansas City did past couple of years, decent defense. They're never great. It's not Pittsburgh. It's not some of the other ones. New England, what they won ball games with. There's never that. But they're just gonna roll up the points. Mm-hmm. But if you can't protect Mahomes, you may as well have me out there, man. I mean, I can run around and eat turf all night if that's what you want.
Yeah. There are. I wanted to go back to the defensive side of the ball. There are guys, I mentioned Bob Mathis because I think Freeney went in the first round, if I'm not mistaken, definitely first or second. But I remember Mathis went in the late rounds, like he might have been a 6th round pick, right? Wow. About to be a Hall of Fame. I think that, in this year's draft, what I've looked at and evaluated, there are so many guys, kind of like how we talked about the offensive line, where all these guys are being talked about. And it's like, okay, they're going to go first, early second. And because they played at these big schools or whatever, they're going to go early. But it's like these other guys that have more numbers, better numbers. And I mean, you correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like that you can look at the numbers in terms of these guys. You cut on the tape. It's like you said, can he play or can't he? Do the numbers, are they justifiable? Like, did he really get that sack, or did he, was he helped out? And it's like this guy I'm looking at here. His name is Teron Jackson. I didn't even realize he was on this consensus All-America list, but I had scouted him when I was going through my mock draft. I did all 7 rounds. Okay. And PFF graded me as an A- for my draft. But I got him at like the 202nd pick, like a 6th round.
You mean for the Bengals?
Pick. Yep. And this guy's a consensus All-American. He had 25 solo tackles, 29 assisted, and 8.5 sacks.
Who's he play with?
2020.
What team?
He went to Coastal Carolina.
Oh, Coastal Carolina, yeah.
Same as Larry Ogunjobi.
We had a wide receiver from Coastal Carolina a few years ago. What was his name? I forget.
Jerome Simpson.
Jerome Simpson. You remember that flip he made into the end zone, jumping over a player? Yeah, he was
Cardinals.
Huh?
Over the Cardinals, I sure do.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of talent out there, man. And it's amazing, to get through that, to get in the process of trying to evaluate all the talent that is out there. It's That's why you get all these misses. You're not playing against the same competition. Guys are not trained the same. I mean, some guys are, you can tell that they're pretty proficient in terms of the technique, and some guys, the guy got a lot of athletic ability, but he hasn't been taught well. So can that guy make that transition, can be coached up to be better than the guy who's playing well? Because the guy who may not be blocking well, but you can see he's got all the athletic traits to be good. So can you make him into a, I made a good offensive lineman, linebacker, or DB. And the teams that can do that, can see that in the guy, can see these are the things that they're pretty minor. I know he can transition and do these things better to make a better ball player. Teams that can do that find all kind of talent, because they're just so, unbelievable talent out there. Just all the schools and all the guys who are playing football. That's like I said before, that's why I say it's impossible to. I pay no attention to the grades from 1 to 20 or from 1 to 50 or whatever, because to me it doesn't mean very much at all in terms of who is the best athlete available. I think you're wasting your time, because it is proven. You mean to tell me Doug Wilkerson, big daddy, was the best? And how many games? How good was he here? He played a long time though, and you see it every year. Well, no, these guys weren't the best. They were good players, but as opposed to going down that list, 1, 2, 3, 20, I'm drafted at 20, and there's this 20 to 25 range because this guy is the best player that fit in that range. Mm-hmm. I think it's a waste. I think you go by position, like I said before. Mm-hmm. You evaluate who you think the best at those positions, and don't worry about everything else. And don't worry about that 1 to 20, because from there you're looking at a few positions. And now, what guy fits my roster? Where am I deficient? Where do I need help? Because you could go through the process. I remember the Detroit Lions years ago, they kept drafting wide receivers because the board says best athlete available within that range. You keep drafting, you draft wide receivers, he's no good. Another one, and he's no good. Man, there's something wrong with your evaluation process. You're listening to the wrong folk. You better do a good job putting the puzzle together with your roster. Hey man, if you're making a pie and you need sugar, but there's plenty of sugar there, and someone says, man, you should try this lemon, all you're going to do is mess up that pie, man. Go with the sugar. If the sugar is there, go with it. And if the wide receiver you need is there, get it. If the tight end is there, get it. Don't get a tight end simply because someone says he's the best player on the board. That's my opinion. I just don't believe in that philosophy. I agree. But if you need a tight end, and if your tight end you got is really not that, you really need to replace him, then fine. But why would you replace a so-called unproven generational tight end or generational DB with a guy who's already a good at a position that's not a weakness?
Right.
That's
right. And I agree. There was a guy that, and this is one of the reasons why I think if the Bengals are in a scenario where there is the option between Sewell, Chase, and Pitts, one of the reasons why they would pass on Pitts is because there was another guy, a kid in the SEC, in fact, similar build, very similar build, could be like a clone. His name is Kenny Yeboah, played for Ole Miss. Should look at his tape. And it's like you put them next to each other. You could tell that, Pitts is a little bit bigger and, is going to catch more balls and passes and everything. But, and then he had a Heisman, voted, in a way, quarterback. He had a great quarterback. I don't know the quarterback for Ole Miss, but Kenny Yeboah is pretty special.
Yeah, but if you had the option on the draft board, but this is between Pitts, Chase, Sewell, and Breeden, then obviously you're going to go with Louis Breeden because you already know that he is a generational talent. You're laughing now. You're not.
I was a baby when you was playing, so I gotta go back and look at the real.
No, those were steals, man. We just that was the black and white silent film day. You know?
Yeah, I gotta go back.
With Charlie Chaplin time, you know. Right. But I'm with you though. I want to see the Bengals, you know, I want to see them improve. And the Bengals have adopted philosophy that you prove through the draft. You improve that way. And I think it's true because that's where most of your talent is going to come. But with the advent of free agency, you can improve, especially when you miss. It's an insurance policy, and if you miss in the draft, you get a chance to determine to choose from a field of players who play in the league, and you see them play not against college players, but against professional players, and you know what they can and cannot do, and they don't need to be, you know, basically coached up. They've been coached. You know, you may find a guy every now and then you may need to do some things with, but you plug them in. And you don't have to worry about what someone says about a draft prospect. I know this guy can play. You know, I'm gonna have to pay him a premium, but that's the National Football League, and that's the game. If you don't play that game, then you're always going to be behind the eight ball. And I think that's one of the things that has hurt the Bengals because, I mean, you don't have to go all in on free agency because I think some teams overspend on free agency, and they, you know, spending money sometimes is not the panacea. It's just not the cure-all.
Right.
You can still be deficient just by spending a lot of money. There's organizationally, you got a lot of other things. You got a lot of other problems going on because you put that talent together. You have to get the right talent together. Right quarterback, right offensive line, and more importantly, the right scheme. If you don't have the right scheme with the people you have, then you're still going to be behind the eight ball. So there's a lot goes into football, man. You know, I think playing basketball with an NBA, I don't know how many it was, 15 players, maybe, I don't know. It's just a lot simpler, man. Mm-hmm. Still not simple. It's hard to win the NBA too, but trying to deal with, you know, that many people on offense, defense, special teams, it takes some skill to put a team together. And I'm not even suggesting that it's easy. It is not, because you're going to have some wins and you're going to have some, no one goes without missing on talent. You just make a whiff. But you can't whiff a lot. And I think the Bengals have whiffed not only in the first, second, but in the second round, third round too. And they do it just too much. And that's what sets them apart from everybody else. Mm-hmm. You know, they whiff with Marvin Lewis was a great, Marvin was, but Dick LeBeau was great. I mean, I always thought he would be a great head coach. And they had David Klingler. They had Kelly Smith. Someone's not evaluating talent, man.
Yeah. Would you say that they didn't have the offensive lines, or it was them as quarterbacks?
I think it was obviously it's a combination of both, because if, you know, Joe Burrow, even with the bad offensive line, good. Patrick Mahomes is going to be good. I don't care who you, even with the bad offensive line. I mean, you can't overcome what they did put on him in the Super Bowl. You can't overcome that. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff, but I mean, Russell Wilson really hasn't had an offensive line to pass protect the whole time he's been in Seattle, but he wins.
Right.
That boy's good.
Right.
Yeah, I would love to see them put it on. I mean, I know he's complained about it. They just haven't put an offensive line. I remember one year they traded away the center, I forget his name, and they brought in, was it Max Younger, I think, and they brought in
Max Younger, yep,
the tight end,
Jimmy Graham.
And I said, that is the dumbest thing in the world. You're destroying your offensive line to bring in a tight end. Are you kidding me?
It didn't even use Jimmy.
I know.
Like the numbers went down when he went to Seattle. It
was never a good fit. I mean, you don't mess up your offensive line when you have Russell Wilson is one of those generational players. He is that good.
They gave away Russell Okung too. They had a great offensive line when they won that Super Bowl. In the year before, they had Okung and Unger.
And Sweezy, I think was it Sweezy?
J.R. Sweezy, yeah.
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
They played well together. But them two guys were top tier first round picks.
Yeah,
and they played well together. And then they had Tom Cable as the coach. Yeah. So they had a great coach. That was the other thing too. I meant to ask you. I know you're gonna put, of course, Jim McNally number one. Paul Alexander, Frank Pollock. Do you think Frank Pollock is them bringing him back is gonna help?
Well, I know Pollock had I guess he was in Dallas. He had a great reputation there. And I know I only say it about Jim McNally because I just know some of the things that he did and the reputation he had around the league. He would go out and scout guys and he would bring guys back. I'm gonna tell you a story. Jim and I, he came from North Carolina State. And knew I went from North Carolina Central, which is right down the road. And he always came over to talk to me all the time. And we just strike up a conversation. And he was kind of a quirky guy, but just a great guy to have a conversation with because he loved football. He talked football all the time. He was pretty hyped about talking football. And when Jim McNally was on the field, all you could hear was Jim McNally and Jim Anderson. Jim Anderson was another guy who was pretty hyped too. But you hear him all the time talking, coaching, all the time. Coaching. You listen to him all the time. There were sometimes he would see me walking down the hall in the locker room at Old Spanny Field. He'd say, "Louis, come here. I'd go in the room and he would have the video on. And it's a video of one of the offensive linemen. It may have been Max Montoya or some other guy who's been looking at it. He says, "Louis, look at this." And he showed me a guy. He showed me this because this guy was in the 7th round, 8th round, and 9th round. And he's like amazed with, look at this. I mean, he's showing me. I don't know basically what I'm looking at, even though I know football. I didn't know I don't know how to coach offensive linemen. He does. But Jim was just very good at looking at talent and making that talent fit the system that the Bengals had. And they depended on him. I mean, they didn't have to draft guys in the 1st round offensive line because they knew Jim could go out there and find the best guys. And he did that. He did that every single year for him. I mean, he was an invaluable guy. And they need Pollock to come in. I don't know how good he is at evaluating talent because all coaches cannot do that, and you can't depend on a guy to do that. But he's supposed to be a hell of an offensive line coach. And I don't know him, but I just know if his reputation is really good.
Yeah. And I know that, Mixon had his career year in 2018 when he was here, and then he went to Dallas, and I didn't follow Dallas that much, but, I looked at it like, okay, well, he had nothing but first rounders. What is the guy? Zach Martin, Tyron Smith, all of these guys is like all world, all pro offensive linemen. So
yeah.
I'm looking at it like, well, how much work did he really need to do? He had the talent.
Dallas did for a period. They did a good job of getting guys into play, constructing that offensive line. But they have some other issues, man. It's a juggle, man. It's not easy to sometimes I guess you're in a room, you're looking at a board and you need this position and you see a guy who's at another position. But the thing that I would keep in mind, none of this is set in stone.
No.
Just because the guys say a guy was going to be great, it doesn't. Greatness has to be he's earned and it has to be determined once the guy plays. So you're always, that fine line making that judgment. But you're always going to have some misses, but just don't have big misses, a lot of misses. And that's the hang up with the Bengals now because they just have too many misses. You can't continue to miss first, second, and third round and be successful. You set your franchise back because I know one time they were constantly looking for tight end. I'm going like, come on, man, DB. What about the offensive line? What about pass rush? What about linebacker? Come on. Right. It's not the route that I would have taken. And that has nothing to do with the guys who came in, because, some of them turned out to be good and some of them weren't as good that they probably thought they were. I did hear something the other day, and offensive line is a safer pick than wide receiver. And I think they were saying like about 67% of the time, the offensive linemen turn out they're there and they're solid players. Only 27% of the time, wide receivers, for whatever the reasons, they miss. They're missing on something with wide receivers. Some people fall in love with speed. It's just, man, this guy can run. Gotta run. Man, this guy is fast. But if he's catching the ball with his chest most of the time, not using his hands, maybe he's not going to be as good, because the chest guys will drop a lot of balls. Mm-hmm. If the guy is constantly injured, maybe he's going to be injured when he gets there. And some of it is just, guys injured just accidentally. He may never be injured again, but you have to take all those things in consideration. And it's not the easiest thing to do. I mean, that because year after year, I know you go through this process. And how many times have you thought guys were going to be this or that, and it turned out to be not even close to it, for whatever the reasons are. Right. Whatever the reasons. There is no guarantee. I mean, some guys are closer to guarantees. Mm-hmm. Joe Burrow wasn't a guarantee, but doggone, he was good in college, man. Man, he just looked good every time. I mean, I never saw him play a bad ball game. And it was just so easy, effortless. It was, he made plays with his legs, with his arms, and there was just something about him you just knew he was going to be good. There's some quarterbacks you just say, well, he made a play, but man, he made a lot of other bad plays. This guy didn't seem like he didn't make bad plays. I mean, everybody's going to throw an interception here, make a bad read, but
he didn't do that.
Rare. It was rare. When it's rare, that's some rarefied. When it's rare, that's some rarefied air right there.
Yeah, I started thinking like Jordan, rarefied air. Yeah, that's.
Oh my God. Yeah. And I watched Chase the other day. I watched him some today. He catches the ball with his hands. He just plucks it out of the air. Plucks it. That's what you want. Pluck it. You're going to have fewer drops that way. Yeah. Defensive backs, you find guys the guy can track the ball. He looks back for the ball, catches the ball. You got something, because a lot of times DBs, he may be the fastest, quickest guy in the world and running with the guy. He never looks back for the ball. He's going to give up a lot of plays. Mm-hmm. Because, versus a guy who will look back, play the ball, and make a play, knock it down. I mean, there's a difference between those two guys. The other guy may run a better 40. He looks better on film, but he's not making plays. There's a reason for that. But can you make that guy make the transition and turn and look and make plays on the football? I mean, Rod Jones. Remember Rod Jones? He was here a few years ago, defensive back. Guy could run. Mm-hmm. Guy could cover. Rod didn't play the ball very well. Just did not. He just looked always. He had interference calls, and guys would catch balls when he had them covered because he didn't look for the football. And you find people go like that. So there are some things that you can see on film. As I said before, the film would tell you basically most of what you need to know, not everything. You can tell a guy's pretty good, and sometimes a guy looks pretty good because the team is just good, like Alabama, Ohio State. And then when they get here, they're like, the guy's really not that good. Well, it was the surrounding people around him that made that team, made him look better than what he is, because teams couldn't do certain things because on this team that they would normally do because they just got too many damn good players, man. Right. Just, Alabama.
That trap, to cut you off, that's where they fell into that trap with Andre Smith. Like, you brought him up. That's where they fell into that trap, because it's like, he wasn't going to work. It's like they should have kicked him in the guard. I mean, but that's neither here nor there. Maybe it would have worked out better. But.
Yeah, but he was a big guy, man. He was big, and I'm sure he's athletic enough he could do it. But he did, he wasn't the player that he should have been. He wasn't the best tackle in the draft. I know that, and that's okay too if he's not. You don't need the best tackle in the draft. You need a guy you need a tackle who can be a very good tackle.
Right.
But you can't end up with the guy who can't block and a guy who can't get on the field.
Right.
That's what you don't want. And the Bengals have had a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, it's a list of guys, according to these, all these different publications and organizations that's saying like, look, we got 1, 2, 3, 4 unanimous, All-Americans, and then we got a list of consensus or guys that didn't make it, so they got a chip on their shoulder, that felt that they should have made the All-American list. And I feel, that just breeds competition. So I think that it's better, But I wanted to say also, let's just say hypothetically they do go with Penei Sewell or Rashawn Slater, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm still taking another, because I know they're going to do it anyway. They're going to take 2 or 3 offensive linemen. I'm still taking another offensive lineman, but I mentioned a couple guys to you, and bring their names up again. Dwayne Eskridge. He went to Central Michigan, same school as Antonio Brown and J.J. Watt. He's going to be great. He averaged 20 yards per catch every year he was at that school, I think. Jalen Darden, he was like a all-purpose threat. You just get the ball in his hands, he's liable to score. Not the average yards per catch as Dwayne Eskridge, but if they are going to start in the trenches, get your guys in the trenches, but you got to come back and get some playmakers to go with a T. Higgins and a Tyler Boyd.
Yeah.
That's a must. And I think they know that. I know they know that, especially if they're about to draft Chase. They know that. So it's the same thing with Chase. Like, okay, you got Jamar Chase, but you're going to need somebody else later on in that draft. So I see it as them taking, a good 2 or 3 offensive linemen, because it's like you're drafting starters. Like last year, I want to give them credit, going from Marvin to Taylor and his guys. They picked up where Marvin and his guys left off in a way. I guess Tobin is the bridge, but I know he has a team of people. They drafted seniors. I think everybody in that draft class was a senior and a captain of their respective teams. So, and all them guys started, I think. I'm talking about the linebackers. Akeem Gaither-Davis played for Appalachian State. He was a senior and a captain on the defense. Logan Wilson, Wyoming, senior and a captain on his defense. But, I mean, they didn't have Reader up front. So these guys didn't shine, but their future is bright. Now you got Larry Ogunjobi, who I told you, the minute that they signed that boy, I said they got the best defensive lineman not named Aaron Donald. Don't nobody even know it.
Yeah.
And, you put him next to Reader, they're going to see. People going to see. So they might.
They're going to need that because you need, and they haven't had that pass rush other than Geno Smith up the middle. They haven't had anyone basically other than Geno in the middle. They had Carlos, and Carlos obviously tailed off. They need pass rushers. It just makes the game never easy, but easier on defense if you can rush the passer. And you saw Tampa Bay rush Kansas City with basically 4, sometimes 5. They basically played cover 2, zone, and they didn't need to send a lot of people, but they didn't need to. Guys couldn't block them. Man, you can block guys straight. If you can't block, you don't have to send 4. My goodness, you can play coverage all game long. Just sit back there in the zone. I mean, you got 7 guys back there just playing areas. It becomes very difficult if the quarterback doesn't have time and he's running around. That's what you want, man. That's that's like stealing candy, man.
Yeah.
You can win that way.
Yeah.
But it's just and the Bengals are struggling on both sides of the ball too. I mean, but this is the good news about the Bengals though. And I just, I always say this because sometimes I have to remind myself about it. As bad as their record ended up, there were a lot of ball games they could have easily won. They went down to the wire.
Yeah.
And that was with an awful offensive line. And that was with a defense that really didn't play as well as it should have or played well. It came right down to the wire.
And that goes back to last year, not just, the year before, not this past year, but
the year before as well. Yeah.
Taylor's first year. He had, I think the stat came up on all the outlets, about, they won or they've lost more games by 8 points or less than any other team in the league or something like that. So that says something too. And it says that they on the right track. Like because I wasn't a believer, if you will, when they signed, not signed, but hired him to be the coach, and just how he spoke and everything. I'm just like, yeah, he's just another yes man. He's not finna do nothing. But I'm just seeing how he's building and what they're doing and how they were in the games that they were in, and then it was his first game. They went to Seattle and almost beat them in his first game as a head coach. It was a 1-point game. I think it was 20-21.
Yeah.
And that was John Ross' highlight of his career as a pro.
He's got one.
Returning home.
And thank God he's got some highlights. But I have to remind, like I said before, I have to remind myself sometime and not make it sound like the world is falling and it's gloom and doom, because it's not. Because once you look at that, the schedule from last year, and once you see how close some of those ball games are, and you look at some of the other teams who won those close games and made the playoffs, and you say, wow, you know what? They weren't just getting blown out.
Right.
They weren't. There were some games they just totally lost control, but a couple of games. But for the most part, they were in ball games with chances to win fourth quarter. And they didn't make enough plays to win ball games because, they just didn't have the talent to do that. So they're missing some pieces, and I don't want to sound like an alarmist, but I don't think they're missing as many pieces as most people think, just because of what they did last year. They were close. Play here, play there, different player here, different player here. Mm-hmm. They win those ball games. You protect Joe Burrow, they win it because they score more points. They win. If you protect it, because the boy can throw the football. Yeah. He threw the football. He made some plays where people were, in his face constantly. And I'm like, oh my goodness, he's going to get killed. But he stays in the pocket to make plays. And his physical dexterity to run, to make those off-script plays. The way he can move in the huddle left and right, the kind of things that Dalton never developed to do. Dalton was good as long as you protect him.
Right.
That ain't football. Just not. It's like the football is no longer 7-on-7 where you drop back in shorts and cleats and nobody's in your face. That's practice. This is not practice. This is live. This is real stuff. This is the game. People are coming after you. Plays are going to change up every single play. You're going to see things you've never seen before. Can you make the adjustments on the fly within a half second? Can you do what Tom Brady does? Knows where he wants to go before the ball's just snapped most of the time. If it's not there, he goes somewhere else. But what allows Tom to do that is they protect him. If they don't protect Tom, it doesn't matter. Tom Brady becomes another quarterback. Tom Brady couldn't win Super Bowls in Cincinnati. Tom Brady's not Tom Brady if he plays here.
Right.
He's
true.
I think he's still going to be good, but he ain't going to win Super Bowls, and he wouldn't be Tom Brady. That marriage between he and Belichick and what they did there was the right one for him, because I don't think one succeeds without the other.
Right. Correct. Yeah, I think it's bright. I really do. I think that I just remembered one analyst said some of the exact words you just used about a player here, a player there. And it's funny to me because he was one of the biggest, Bengal downers, and would just continue to perpetuate the historical notion about the organization. And then all of a sudden, because I kind of get up and cut him on every morning, Colin Cowherd, all of a sudden he says, Joy, talking to his anchor, Joy Taylor, he said, Joy, Cincinnati is a team to watch out for. I think I dropped my food and looked at the TV like, what? Like, because a year ago, and then he didn't like Joe Burrow. And then he brought Joe Burrow on his show and he talked about, I think I was wrong about you. He was calling him Tony Romo. And he said, you know what, I was wrong. I think you're special. And he said, they fixed that offensive line. Watch out for Cincinnati next year. It was funny.
Yeah. You still got to play defense, though.
But you got to play right. But it was just funny hearing him say that.
Yeah, they could have a chance to seriously make the playoffs because, like I said before, they could have won easily 9 games last year, no question.
Mm-hmm.
But just by making a play here or a play there, protect your quarterback, make a play defensively. But the question is, can they do that? Can they find the right puzzle? It's not like the puzzle you buy in a box and it's like you got 2 pieces missing and those 2 pieces are just sitting right there in front of you. All you have to do is put them in. Well, it's not that easy. You have to go out and find those pieces because those pieces are not lying right there in front of you. You have to make those pieces fit. You have to find the right pieces to fit into this puzzle. And can you do that?
Right.
New England does it. I know it's getting monotonous. It's the same thing. Pittsburgh does it.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other teams who do the Ravens, and there are some other teams as well, because come playoff time, same guys, usually. Same guys, just there because they're good. It's you go to a bar, man, some guys can make that great martini, man. It's the right mix every time. And then some guys are like, man, this thing is nasty. And right now, the Bengals have been one of those nasty martinis, and they have to find the right mix to be contenders. They're not far off from tasting good. They really aren't.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a little bit more gin here. I don't know.
Yeah, they hit on this draft like they did, because I really feel like they picked up where Marvin left off. Like it wasn't a drop off. People might have thought like, well, these guys ain't. No, they just didn't have all the pieces playing at the same time. I think people will see this year. But if they do what they did in terms of like the selections and getting those right pieces, and apply them, and everybody's healthy, I think they're going to be serious immediately.
Well, they could be. I think their defensive backs may be okay. I have some concerns about the linebackers and the defensive line. I would have liked to see. Has Geno signed with anyone? I know they say it was a possibility of him coming back, but
they were talking about it's a possibility of bringing him back. Yeah, I remember hearing that. I hope they do, honestly, because they really need. Like I said, that formula it's only like 1 or 2 exceptions. The '99 Rams didn't have a first-round defensive lineman or a first-round linebacker, if I'm not mistaken. Probably a first-round safety either. But it's funny, though, speaking of the Rams, because I was going to ask you, and I'm glad you brought up the defensive backs. I was going to ask you who the coach was, and I just sat here and looked him up. His name is Steven Jackson from right here in Houston. He was on that '99 Super Bowl team with St. Louis. Go figure.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. He was on the losing team. He's on the losing end. But the point is, he was a Super Bowl DB on that roster, and so you got a guy coaching that actually played, and I think you touched on that. Versus like Forrest Gregg, Hall of Fame player, head coach, so he can connect with the players. And it's like, I don't know if Frank Pollack played or whatever, but he's supposed to be a great offensive line coach. But this guy, Steven Jackson, played the game, went to a Super Bowl. So I feel better about him coaching up guys as opposed to them doing what they did that whole Marvin Lewis era for almost 2 decades of drafting corners in the first round.
Yeah, they draft a lot of corners. But as I said before, I think they would have been better. I mean, they had a lot of things go wrong for them. I mean, that playoff game at Pittsburgh, I remember they should have won that ball game, and they had the game won. And was that Mixon who fumbled?
No, that was Jeremy Hill. He wasn't. You talking
that
about
was Hill?
Yeah. Game?
Yeah, the playoff game. That was Hill. Yeah. I mean, the game is won. I mean, the guy's not trying to fumble. I'm not saying that. I mean, fumbles happen, but things like that happen. But they needed a quarterback to make plays. You have to have a quarterback who can do more than just stand in the pocket and throw the football. And Andy Dalton could not climb the ladder. He couldn't move up in the pocket laterally, right or left, to make plays. He couldn't pick him up a first down with his legs. He was just in the pocket quarterback, and if nothing was there, he was absolutely done. And you can win with a guy like that, but you got to protect him.
Yeah. And that's the old way, like you said. To your point, that's still the old way of winning. You really can't play football like that anymore. You really got to be able to move. Yeah. You got to have legs. You got to create.
Yeah. Because eventually things will break down. I mean, you don't want a guy running all over the place.
No. Right.
I want Lamar Jackson to have a little bit more patience, because I think eventually, you get hurt, or eventually what happens to a guy who does a lot of running, if you're not one of the better passers, I mean, he's an outstanding player. Heck, he was MVP, but if you rely on it too much, eventually you're not going to be around very long. I mean, I said the same thing about, as great as Cam Newton was, I always said Russell Wilson would be, his longevity was great. He was going to be a better player because Russell was just a better passer. Mm-hmm. And if I got two players and one is a better runner than passer, but he win ball games for you, but one is the better passer than runner, I'm going to take the better passer. I mean, I want the guy to be mobile, but you got to have a guy who can fire it, man. And that's why I like Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow, he's not the quickest, swiftest, but he is very good in terms of turning nothing into something. I mean, he doesn't do it nobody does it like Lamar Jackson.
Right.
Mahomes is not the quickest and fastest, but
he know how to create. That's why I call him man and all that.
Let pick up the first down. He just knows. It's just, and you know what? It's like natural to you, man. If some things are just, you just do it. It just becomes, it's instinctive. Mm-hmm. What was the line? I'm drawing a blank with names here. What was the linebacker that was the great linebacker? He retired maybe a year ago with Carolina, came from Boston College. From Cincinnati.
Luke, Super Luke, yeah.
Hey, he may be the most instinctive linebacker I've ever seen in my life. He was just, you can just see as soon as the ball snapped, there was just no hesitation. He just sees it and he goes, man. That's what I call instinctive. David Focher was that way. He was very instinctive. Troy Polamalu, Patrick Mahomes is that way, and Joe Burrow is in that category. I'm not talking about just athleticism. I'm just talking about being an instinctive player. You can bring in the best linebacker, the best, strongest, most athletic linebacker, and if he's not instinctive, he can't play because the play is already gone by the time you figure it out. Right. And that's why Kuechly was so darn good, made all those tackles. It wasn't because he was just blowing things up, hitting guards and hitting tackles, and he just got there before they did. Mm-hmm. It was just, it was a beauty to watch him play. It was just, and Troy Paul out of Pittsburgh, it was just, you see him play, and LeBeau put him in position to make plays, but most guys couldn't make that plays because they just didn't have the instincts that he has. And some guys are just that way. It's a natural thing. It is not something you can teach. You either have it or you don't. You don't have to be those guys to be all world, but those are just some exceptions where they may have lacked some skills in some other places, but their instincts was just so superior that it just stood out, and they made plays. You just couldn't block him. I mean, he led the league in tackle just about every year he was there, man. He was just an incredible player.
Yeah. I think it's a couple of guys. I think they'll both be gone because I actually, this was back in February, I want to say I made a post about, the Bengals taking Sewell and then trading back into the first round and getting one of the linebackers. And the linebacker that I said was Nick Bolton out of Missouri. He's not the prototypical size like Zaven Collins is like 6'4", 250. This Nick Bolton kid is like, I think like maybe 6 feet, 230, 220, somewhere around there. But he's supposed to be special like that.
Okay, yeah.
But yeah,
I think I saw there's a linebacker who I saw play. It's a big kid. He was either from Tulsa or TCU.
That's Xavier Collins that played for Tulsa. That's the Beneric and got all the trophies galore. All-American.
I saw him play. Have you watched him?
I have not.
He just looks like a guy who plays with a lot of instincts, man. I only watched him because I saw his name come up and I wanted to watch him. I mean, like, my God, this guy's good. He's a big kid too, but he just played with so much. He's very athletic. I saw him make some plays with interceptions and the way he played the ball and the way he run down people and the way he got to the football. He just looks like a very instinctive player. And instincts is, you can teach a lot of things, but that's one of the things that you just can't. You can teach a guy better to read plays better and get to the ball. That's not what I'm talking about. But some guys, it just comes natural to them, like swimming, man. It just some things, how you don't talk about some things, it's just natural. It's natural for some than what it is for others. And that's why some guys are just better. They may not be the strongest, they may not be the fastest, but they get there quicker because of their instincts. This is the guy who you think may be the best because he has all the accolades. He's still waiting for the play to develop. Well, that's 2, 3, 4 steps and the play is gone. Luke Kuechly is already there, and that's the difference. The Bengals drafted a guy, it was 3 or 4 years ago, from Texas, 3rd round pick. I forget his name. And I went and watched him play. It only took one film session for me to say, I don't know why they drafted him, because that one film, that video told me that he wasn't instinctive because he never made, you would see him he never got to the ball and he did a lot of standing around. I guess he ran fast, great physical specimen. He was there for 1 year. And I don't know why they didn't see that. Your linebackers, they have to have some instincts. They don't have to be Luke Kuechly because there are no other Luke Kuechlys, but there are few. But you got to be instinctive. That's the position, man. If you're not instinctive, strength and size and speed and doesn't matter. If you can run a 4.6 and 4.7 and have instincts, you get to the ball quicker than the guy runs 4.4, 4.3. Because you've already read it. He's 3 or 4 steps behind. I mean, who's more valuable to you? You still there?
It was saying that my internet connection.
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can hear you now.
Okay, yeah, my internet connection was slowing down. It was saying.
Okay.
But yeah, I can hear you.
Can we wrap this up too?
Yeah. We've been going a little over 2 hours now.
This was fun.
No, I appreciate you. I know all the people watching back in Cincinnati appreciate you too.
No, I love this, man, because you and I, we talk football. I know you follow this stuff, and I have a lot of respect for your opinions. You follow it. You do better than most, and this is the fun time to draft is tomorrow, and everybody's anxious and patiently waiting for another year of the draft, and that looking for a little insight. I'm hopeful. I'm praying they do a good job in doing some things to try and turn things around. Maybe there's a lightning bolt somewhere where they find the perfect player, the perfect fit for an organization that's in need of some new stuff. I mean, the fans are getting a little weary waiting for the Bengals to win a playoff game. It's been eons. So let's play that pick the right player, and that we can win some ball games and make the playoffs this year. How about that?
Yeah, yes, sir. I think they will.
All right.
Right. All right. I want to thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, the great Louis Breeden, for joining us. And I'm sure we'll do this during the season. We'll check back and see how it goes.
Hey, we'll do that. All right.
Okay. All right.
All right, bro.
Appreciate you.
Take care, man.
Okay. You too.
All right.
Bye-bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, signing off here. God Fibonacci, the Wolf